Well, I'm Edward Spencer, and I'm talking to Dr. Richard Sauder, who has written some very interesting books. The one I have in front of me is Hidden in Plain Sight, Beyond the X-Files, and it's about what's going on underground and under the ocean floor. Uh, Richard, what would you like to say about this? How would you like to start?
Well, it depends on what angle you would like to approach the topic from. What's happening underground dovetails with so many different things that there's any number of ways to approach it from the standpoint of the black budget and of vast sums of money being uh, siphoned off from the, shall we say, the everyday economy of the United States and, in fact, of the world, or you could look at it from the standpoint of military policy or compartmentalized top secret black budget policy, or from the standpoint of a really a parallel society that has been established over the last, well, I would say, century or so. So there are many different ways you could approach it. What would you prefer?
Well, let's talk about the parallel society, which is, I think, leads into everything else, because this breakaway civilization, I think also been a term. Parallel society obviously siphons off money, runs in the military, and is a totally compartmentalized secret, and we don't know what it's up to.
Well, it's not only in the military, it's in other agencies as well, and not non-military government agencies, and also extends outside of the government into the major corporations and think tanks, and has its tentacles into the world of high finance. It's a sprawling global multidimensional octopus that interfaces with everyday society in ways that most people in the open society at large do not suspect. What for me the most important technology that has been developed to enable this parallel society is, I don't like to call it a breakaway society because it has not broken away. It is dovetailed in numerous ways with the so called everyday open society and interfaces with it in many ways. So I don't think it is broken away, but it is parallel and interfacing with. Right? I don't think that the term breakaway situation accurately describes what's going on because a civilization has not broken away. It dovetails with and interfaces with the everyday open society at large in numerous ways at multiple levels. So it's right here, but it is very artfully camouflaged such that it makes it difficult for, shall we say, the average man or woman to easily detect its presence, but it is here. One of the ways to detect its presence is, as we've alluded to already, the vast sums of money being siphoned out of the real economy, trillions of dollars, are being siphoned off. And of course, Wall Street plays a role in that. The big banks do. The major national central banks around the world are involved in this. Fortune 500 companies, military agencies, and more. According to some information I have, it's quite probable that um, powerful religious organizations such as the Roman Catholic Church, the Mormon Church, the Scientologists, and others probably are involved in this to some degree, maybe to a great degree. I don't know because I'm not on the inside of this compartmentalized world. But this has all been enabled by a breakthrough, a technological breakthrough that most researchers ignore, but without which none of it would be possible. And that is the technology of hermetically compartmentalizing subsectors of human society. This is what military agencies do, and the intelligence agencies do. The initiatic societies do it as well. Initiatic societies meeting the Knights of St. John of Malta, the P2 Lodge in Italy, the Masonic lodges, Knights Templar, etc. The CIA is an initiatic organization, as is the NSA. Any organization, governmental, military, or non-military or non-governmental, including some of the religious organizations that require the taking of oaths and vows, and the swearing to secrecy and that type of thing, are initiatic organizations. And when you enter them and you proceed through them by through the initiatic levels, you are essentially cordoned off from the rest of society and communicate intimately with people inside your cells. And this this technique of compartmentalizing subsectors of society and walling them off from the society at large, such that once you're inside one of these operations or cells, you do not interface with the outside society with regard to what is happening inside the compartmentalized, very tightly defined and narrowly constrained and restricted societal subsector. Once you have achieved that, then you can create a parallel societal structure that exists side by side and interfaces with the normal everyday society. Without the everyday society, however, being able to feasibly discover what is going on inside, or even suspecting that there is an inside to know anything about. You know, John Pena Craven described this very succinctly in his book, The Silent War. John Pena Craven was appointed by Admiral Rickover at the height of the Cold War to establish the capability of the United States Navy to go down as deep as 20,000 feet under sea and carry out operations 4 miles down. John Pena Craven did that. He developed a whole line of deep sea submersibles that could go down with man crews, thousands and thousands of feet. And a great deal of what they accomplished, even 30, 40 years ago, is still extremely classified. We don't know about it. In his book, he described the um, um, deep submergence, deep sea submergence rescue vehicle. And in describing it, said quite openly that even today, that vehicle has capabilities and operational missions that have not been publicly described, and that it's when he wrote the book about 10 years ago, he said that the vehicle is more sophisticated, a more sophisticated vehicle than the space shuttle, and with capabilities that have never been publicized. So you interpret that a deep sea submersible that has capabilities that have never been publicly described and that is more sophisticated than the space shuttle. What in the world is he saying? Well, he didn't elaborate beyond that. But that tells you right there that it was no ordinary submarine. And what its actual mission was, officially, it was to rescue submariners from sunken submarines. But that's something that you can talk about publicly and was talked about publicly. So there was a completely other aspect of that deep sea submersible and its mission, which has never been publicly explained or discussed. And it's so sophisticated that it's more sophisticated than the space shuttle was. And the space shuttle was quite a complicated machine. Now, in his book, he also describes how the world of inside compartmentalization works, how you describe, how you construct a parallel society brick by brick. The example he gives is you have a submariner, an officer, who is, uh, as a commission, as a submarine officer on a naval submarine. That's his open job. Now, he will be then assigned to a particular submarine and will be attached to it when it's in port and dry dock, being refitted, being maintained, as well as when it's at sea on patrol. However, subsumed within that open naval commission, he will be given another mission that is not publicly known, such that the submarine may be docked at the berth in San Diego or Norfolk or Kings Bay or Bangor, wherever the United States Navy has submarine bases. And the ship's log may indicate that he reports every day for duty at 8 o'clock and goes home every day he gets off duty at 8 o'clock in the evening. Well, he may or may not actually physically be on the submarine, you see. That may be cover for a second mission, which is not publicly known. And then within that second mission, there may be yet a third mission that is even more secretive, such that he may report for duty on the second commission or second mission. And then within that is subsumed yet a third mission. The example he gives is the Sand Dollar Project. And Sand Dollar was a project the Navy had decades ago. I don't think it's operational anymore. Uh, I don't believe he actually violated any oaths or any secrecy clearances in writing his book. I'm pretty sure he had to clear it with the United States Navy censors before he published it because he had one of the most sensitive missions in the United States Navy over the last half century, extremely sensitive. My research suggests that, um, strongly suggests, as a matter of fact, because I talked with men who worked under Craven, none of whom are willing to be publicly identified. And that goes with the territory. When you start bumping up against the edges of this secret world, of this parallel structure um, that's been established now for decades and decades and decades, there are very few people who are willing to talk at all. And those who are willing to talk are not willing to have their names publicly mentioned. So I don't do that because I have a healthy survival instinct. However, one of the programs that was carried out was a so-called rock site program, which came out of the R&D, research and design for the rock site program, was done at China Lake Naval Weapons Station in California back in the mid to late 60s. And I might add that a parallel uh, research and design project was carried out at the Stanford Research Institute a few years later, which is also in California. Um, and both of these published documents that are in the public literature, open literature, which I obtained and which I cite in my book, Hidden in Plain Sight Beyond X Files. The documents have to do with building manned undersea bases down in the bedrock beneath the seafloor, well out to sea. Both sets of documents set out three or four proposed missions for these bases. One mission was to actually have um, nuclear missile silos down in the ocean seafloor, in the ocean bed, buried in the rock undersea. And John Pena Craven also discusses this in his book, The Silent War. Edward Teller, who was also working at the very highest levels, research and design levels of the military industrial complex for years, Edward Teller was the father of the American hydrogen bomb and also worked on other secret projects. Uh, One of the sources who spoke to me um, knew Edward Teller personally and worked with him. And John Pena Craven obviously did too, because he mentions Edward Teller in his book and says that Edward Teller wanted him to make the subsea nuclear missile silos out of solid glass. Now, why glass? Because at great depth in the ocean, glass has greater strength, structural strength, than steel. In fact, glass, we're talking silicon dioxide, is 20 times stronger than structural steel at great depth undersea because of the pressure. This pressure compresses the crystalline structure of the glass and makes it far stronger than structural steel. Now, I don't know if the United States Navy, in fact, did make solid glass missile silos and embed them in the seafloor in association with manned undersea bases, but I think maybe they did because I ran across the concept more than once in my research. So it was something that the Navy's underground undersea bases program was actively researching and working on back in the 1960s. That's almost half a century ago. Well, it is a half a century ago. The 1966 is exactly half a century ago. So we're not talking about recent history here. We're talking about an R&D project that has a long lead time. And the fact that I found it discussed more than once in the open source material available to me makes me suspect that in the classified world, they took the concept even further and quite possibly did engineer it so that it's in service right now. And the undersea basis concept, John Pena Craven does not talk about in his book. And I think his silence on that is very telling because I did find a fair amount of documentation showing that the United States Navy was absolutely working on that, on the research and design of those facilities during the 1960s at the very height of the period where John Pena Craven was tasked by Admiral Rickover with developing a deep sea, undersea capability for the United States Navy. And we're talking about going down miles. Now, I think it's been done to a man, the persons I spoke with that had been associated with the R&D work for the rock site program. When I asked them, has it been done? They didn't say no, and they didn't say yes. They said, I don't know. I was not on the operational side. I was on the research and design side. So with the re- whatever was done with the research and design that my team was working on, I can't say because my part of whatever happened or didn't happen had to do with R&D. And that's the way the compartmentalized world works. Another example I can give you of that is the well-known underground base on the outskirts of Kirtland Air Force Base in the Sandia National Laboratory just outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. That underground base, which I'm told these by now is vast, truly vast, uh, was started right after World War II because when the Americans went into um, Nazi Germany, into the Third Reich, even before the end of the war, they started encountering major underground installations. I mean, large and sophisticated, that the Nazis had been building. And they realized there was a underground bases gap. So the guy that was in charge of that was named Xaver Dorsch, personally tasked by Hitler with building huge underground bases in the closing years of the war. And this was done by the TOTE organization, which was the equivalent, the analog to the Army Corps of Engineers and to the Navy Seabees in the American military system. But the TOTE organization had made all of these really serious underground facilities, very large, elaborate, and well constructed. So after the war, the United States Army took Salvador Dorsch into custody, and he was in American military custody for a period of years. I got some of the translated debriefing documents that he wrote, but I'm assuming there's a great deal still classified 70 years later that he wrote that is not that has never been declassified, maybe never will. Salvador resurfaced in the early to mid 1950s. He was in American military custody for years and just dropped off of the radar, but then resurfaced in Germany in the 1950s and established a civil engineering firm that's still in existence today. It's a respected engineering firm in Germany today, although Xaver Dorsch died some years ago. Now, what happened was when the United States military became aware, starting already before the war's end, when they started overrunning some of these Nazi facilities, they realized, holy moly, we got to have this stuff because it's quite advanced. So after World War II, the United States military began what they called the Underground Plant Program. My research indicates it never stopped. They started building underground facilities right after World War II and never stopped. One of the publicly known ones is the so called Monsanto base that's right there on the outskirts of Kirtland Air Force Base and the Sandia National Laboratory, out right along the front range of the Monsanto Mountains in south central New Mexico. Now, I talked to one of the men who was involved in the first stages of construction of that base. He described to me how it worked. And this is a man who spent his whole career as an underground miner for a variety of federal agencies throughout the continental western states of the United States. He worked on all kinds of underground projects, and that's all he ever did. He was a lifelong hard rock underground miner for the United States. And one of the projects he worked on was this underground base, which was started right after World War II in New Mexico. He told me that when his crew went into the mountain, every time they worked on a tunnel or a shaft or a room, that they went in blindfolded. They were always taken into the mountain blindfolded. So they never had any idea where in the mountain they were. And then the blindfold was removed when they got to their work area. And they would blast and tunnel and excavate. And then when they were through with their shift, they would be blindfolded again and taken out of the mountain. Moreover, when they completed a tunnel or a shaft or a chamber or a room, some of which are decently sized, and were taken to another part of the mountain to work on another part of the underground facility, they would again be blindfolded. So you have to understand that even the men who built this underground base could not tell you what it looked like. They had no idea. They were blindfolded coming and going, and they were moved when they were moved from one work area to another, they were also blindfolded. Now that is literal physical compartmentalization such that even the guys who built the underground base couldn't tell you what it looks like, what the layout is. They don't know.
It's incredible.
That's how it's done.
Yeah. Um, I think what you said is the the technology here that really got me is the um, initiatic, if that would be the way to put it, technology. The
Yes, it
way
is. It's initiatic. It has multiple levels, and John Pena Craven explains that in the case of this naval officer, and basically he's describing his own life. Um, you don't tell your wife, you don't tell your friends. You certainly would have other officers that you would associate with on the submarine to which you were assigned, and they wouldn't know anything either because they're out of the loop and you dare not talk. So it's so compartmentalized. And John Pena Craven explains how it works when he was first brought into this type of environment. He was taken into a room that is the analog of a secure bank vault. And the door was closed, and then he was told basically, you're on the inside now, buddy, and here's the project you're going to be working on, and information about it doesn't leave this room, which was an analog of a bank vault. So that's the level of security. It's it's unbelievable, and that was the level of security half a century ago.
where are references on this? Craven, John Pena Craven.
John Pena Craven's book, The Silent War.
Okay.
He lays it out. He explains how this system works. He explains, in other words, he's explaining the system in which he worked during his career in the Navy, the system in which he worked that he was tasked with by Admiral Rickover. So we have the outward Navy where we know there's submarines and there are aircraft carriers and supply ships and amphibious assault ships and then you have naval aviation and all of these things that you can read about in the newspaper and see photographs of on the internet. And then there's an entirely different Navy that is so secretive that once you're in, you're in, and you don't talk about it. And we don't know much about that Navy. But if you read John Pena Craven's book, you get a few clues and a few hints. Not many, but if you read with your eyes open and you read between the lines, he does drop a few hints. And the deep submergent rescue vehicle is one of them. He plainly states, it's a deep diving submarine, and yet it has capabilities that have never been publicly revealed. And technologically, it's more sophisticated than a space shuttle, which was a very sophisticated, complicated machine. So you tell me what he's saying because I have some ideas based on my research, but um, beyond that, he was very coy.
You have the feeling that these gigantic aircraft carriers and other things are just there for show, almost. Well, they
Well,
do
well,
blow
they'll
up
be
third world
well,
places.
they'll be if there's a real shooting war with Iran, with Russia, with China, all of those countries, and in India also, they have weapons that can destroy aircraft carriers within 15 minutes. They'll just be gone. They'll vaporize them.
Would these be nuclear weapons, or is this something other?
Well, yes, they could be nuclear or non-nuclear. The Indians, the Iranians, the Chinese, and the Russians, and for all I know, the North Koreans by this time have very high speed um, cruise missiles with a range of upwards of 200 miles or maybe even more that come in at 2,000 miles per hour, skimming the waves. They don't even need a nuclear warhead or any explosive warhead. They'll punch a hole right through an aircraft carrier at the waterline. They'll punch a hole about 40 feet in diameter,
Just on
right
kinetic.
at the. They're going 2,000 miles per hour, man.
Yeah.
They're going like 2 or 3 times the speed of a rifle bullet. And they come in, they weigh a couple thousand pounds, and bang, the kinetic force is just tremendous, like a cookie cutter. They go in one side and come out the other, and whatever if they hit the, you know, nuclear reactor, uh, propulsion system, um, crew quarters, uh, whatever they hit, they're going to vaporize because it's just so fast and so violent. So they don't even need to put a nuclear warhead on that thing, just or any warhead at all. Just the missile itself going at 2,000 or 2,200 miles per hour. By the time it's spotted coming over the horizon, 5 seconds later, it holds the ship at the waterline. Even one of those could probably take an aircraft carrier down. But they won't fire just one, you see. If they know there's an American aircraft carrier 120 miles out over the horizon, oh my God, they'll fire 20 or 30 of them. And if even two or three of them make it through the aircraft carriers picket line defenses, and probably they will, they'll take it down. And it will all happen in less than 15 minutes.
Are these things, these missiles, we'll call them, powered by rocket engines, or is there some other technology involved?
No, I think they just use conventional aerospace technology.
Hmm.
It's just that Russian aerospace technology at this point is so much better than the American technology. They're a leap ahead. Um, they're probably 10 years ahead. And the Russians have jointly made a missile called the BrahMos with the Indians. It's a joint Russian Indian project. It's a missile of the type I've just described. The Chinese, of course, have the silkworms, but they have updated versions which are faster and more accurate than the silkworms of 20 years ago. The Iranians also have the Russian and Chinese missiles, as well as having developed their own anti ship missiles. So if there are one or two American aircraft carrier battle groups in the Persian Gulf, and they are so foolish as to attack Iran, the Iranians will take them out within 10 minutes. They'll just be gone. It'll be multi-billion dollar United States naval scrap metal in a matter of minutes. The Russians would do the same thing in the Mediterranean or in the Black Sea or the Baltic Sea. The Chinese would do the same thing in the South China Sea, in the East China Sea, or in the Western Pacific. In a shooting war with any of these countries, the United States is going to take extremely heavy losses in the first half hour.
Well, I certainly believe that, and it's very interesting that I read Anthony C. Sutton about all of the incredible help that the United States, Wall Street, gave to Soviet Union. The best enemy money can buy, Wall Street and the rise of Hitler, Wall Street and the Bolsheviks. So we were way ahead, and I guess now we're way behind. He
We,
also,
that's right. You have to understand that war is a big business, and the bigger the war, the bigger the money, and that the intent in war, from the standpoint of let's say Wall Street or the City of London, is not necessarily that one side is preferred over the other. By arming both sides, by funding both sides, by supporting both sides. No matter who wins, the big money boys win. It doesn't matter who wins, they always win because they funnel assistance to both sides. So the dupes, so to speak, American dupes who think that American companies and so forth are on their side could not be more mistaken. They don't care how many people get killed. All they care is how much money they make. And to a certain extent, the more people killed, the more money that they make because they're trafficking in missiles, bombs, uranium, warships, warplanes, you name it, tanks, armored personnel carriers. So the more of that stuff that gets vaporized, the more needs to be rebuilt to rearm, either during the conflict, if it's a long conflict, or after the conflict, if it's short and violent. So no matter what happens, they come out ahead because their concern is profits. And we're not talking millions of dollars or even billions of dollars. In the case of modern warfare, we're talking about trillions of dollars. So you balance your life or my life or the lives of any people you know or care about against these devils, these malevolent devils, $1 trillion profits, if you can see that to them, you don't matter. They don't care if you die or if you suffer. They won't disturb their rest whatsoever.
Okay, well, that's a cheerful way of looking at it, and I think it's entirely correct. Um, have you been attacked? Well, I know you've been attacked, of course, in numerous ways, financially, everything else, for what you do. But is there anything you would want to tell us about how you've been
Well, not
attacked?
not not too much, but I do live a fairly marginal life. I have very little money. Um, I live very modestly. I I rent a one room that has two small end tables, one small bed, um, and I have one pot that I cook with. I have a $13 hot plate that I bought here in Quito. I have a $25 blender and a laptop computer, and that's it. I just described to you my life. So I live at a very minimal level. I was almost killed over 3 years ago. I don't know exactly why. I know who was involved, but I don't know who may have been involved surreptitiously behind the scenes. Um, I barely survived. I was in the hospital for more than 4 months. I'm still recuperating, still regaining function in my lower extremities. I was savagely beaten. I was injected with something, and other things were done to me. I had at least one injection with a large, um, uh, what are they called in
Sir,
English?
syringe or
Syringe,
yeah.
yes, but it was a large one. I tried to refuse it, but at that point I had been physically abused so gravely I could scarcely even move, so I couldn't resist. I was injected against my will. I don't know what I was injected with. I don't know if there was more than one injection, but there was at least one that I remember. I was very close to death at that point. I did survive just barely and made it to the hospital in the following days. And as I said, I spent several weeks, several months hospitalized initially. Um, I couldn't even stand up, couldn't feel anything beneath my knees. I was just beat, very brutally beaten. And anyway, I survived, and we're talking
And I'm sure happy that you have survived. But where were you beaten? Where what
here in
graph
Ecuador.
in Ecuador? Okay.
But you have to understand, um, with something like that, I'm not saying that an American government agency was involved behind the scenes. I'm also not saying that American agency was not involved.
Yeah.
What I am saying is that if there was involvement by an American agency, that it's almost impossible to find that out because they always use levels of plausible deniability. They'll always have three or four levels between the embassy and the savage beating. I mean, the thug they used to do it will never know who really paid him or who told him to do it. It'll be someone he knows, but who's behind that person, he'll never know.
Yeah. Wow. Are you targeted in other ways?
Well, I think so.
Electronically, mind control, stuff like that.
Well, I think there have been attempts. I'm a person who's done a lot of. I've used a lot of shamanic plants. I've had many psychic and spiritual experiences over the years, many, many. And what I have detected in recent years is um, military remote viewers trying to come into my consciousness, especially at nighttime when I'm relaxed. This is something that didn't occur 20 or 30 years ago, but it has multiple times in recent years. So for whatever reason, it appears the American military from time to time wants to remote view me. God help them. They're so stupid and so ignorant, Edward. I don't know what to say. I've discovered that some of the most confused people are military personnel who are in these compartmentalized programs. And this includes remote viewers who, in theory, are working on higher consciousness, but in reality are, are stuck remote viewing other people, events, places, things for the military, but not for any good reason. Because the United States military is a great deep cesspool of darkness and malevolence. So my advice would be to anyone who's caught up into that, or any compartmentalized individuals who are listening to this program, get out of there. Save your soul because it's bad karma. It's some of the worst karma there is. The United States military institution is so evil, Edward.
Yeah. Yeah. How can you tell that you're remote viewing? What do you experience to know that? I mean, I know, of
Well,
course,
it,
that
it
it's
has
true.
this will mean nothing to someone who's never done meditation, to someone who's not used shamanic plants or has not had an experience with being out of the body, as I have many times, and that kind of thing. It's just that when you are moving into these other states of awareness, other senses open up in your consciousness. We're taught about the five senses: sense of taste, smell, hearing, sight, and what's the other one? Touch. But there are many other senses that the human organism can access. The average person is blind to this because the average person is so dumbed down and so dulled down that they're not most of the time consciously experiencing these things, if ever. But these other senses exist, and they're very direct, they're very subtle, and they're very direct, such that when you are in an altered state or relaxed state and someone remote views you, you detect that. If they're remote viewing you and you're aware of it, you're also to a degree remote viewing them. And you just directly sense things about them. Uh, just the smell of the American military, just
Huh.
instant, you know, it's American military, it's a remote viewer. They want to know this, they want to know that. And of course, why my life is any interest or any business to them, you tell me. It means that these remote viewers themselves have such a small life that they take direction from American military officers to do that when they would be better off if they were more self directed and would use their remote viewing to advance their own personal degree of understanding and enlightenment. Um, I think maybe as time goes on, some of them begin to understand that and leave the military. But from what I can see, while they're in the military, they take orders, and they're given targets to remote view. When the military remote viewers are given a target, it doesn't say on a piece of paper, remote view Richard Sauder in Quito, Ecuador. It doesn't say that. There'll just be a string of numbers, maybe numbers and letters. It might say PKL 145 MMB, literally. And they'll be told that's target. So that, and then they'll review the target without knowing going in that it's me. Of course, in the process of remote viewing me or anyone else, they will pick up information about the person, what they're doing, what they're thinking. Um, it would be the same for me. I have zero interest in remote viewing American military remote viewers. Those people are so uninteresting to me that I can't describe to you how boring their, their compartmentalized, blindfolded little lives are.
Have you been in contact with Dr. Robert Duncan? Um,
Don't know him. Don't know
well,
him.
he's written Soul Project Soul Catcher. Um, volume 2 was the first volume. Is uh, Secrets of Cyber and Cybernetic Warfare Revealed, and it's just like what you're talking about is in this book and in his discussion of EEG heterodyning and remote viewing, and this, uh, giving somebody a string of numbers or a code like that is consistent with this sort of stuff.
Well, that's
Uh,
the way they do it.
yeah.
That's the way they do it.
Well, I think we've taken an hour right now. This has been extremely interesting, more than interesting, and we want to visit you again and go on with other topics. But I think we need to shut down right now and probably uh, edit what we've got.
Edward,
Yes.
may I mention my blog site?
Oh, yes, please do.
My blog site is Event Horizon Chronicle, and that's www.eventhorizon.chronicle.com. Excuse me, that's www.eventhorizon.chronicle.blogspot.com. Eventhorizon.chronicle.blogspot.com. People can obtain my books on the website. They can also read my periodic blog posts, which go back several years. And the majority of the blog posts stand on their own. So those who are interested may go back through the years and read my blog posts on a wide variety of topics, including on shamanism. There are a few having to do with underground and underwater bases and many other topics.
Well, I'm going to go there, and I'm sure almost everybody else is too. Well, I want to thank you, Richard, Dr. Richard Sauder. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, sir, you
Oh,
are.
okay. And we'll wish you well, and we'll be in touch again soon
Thank
about
you,
for
Edward.
another interview.
Thank you, Edward. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you very much. Bye
All
bye.
right. Goodbye.